anyways, this lecture is going to focus on feminist theories of crime. One thing we want to think about is what is the purpose of feminist theories of crime? Traditional criminology is really rooted in men's experiences. The early criminologists, early sociologists are pretty much all men and overwhelmingly white privileged men. Most of their research also uses groups of adolescent boys or men. So this is really then most of our early criminological theory is focused on men. We don't know if that applies to women. We don't have a single feminist theory, so there are feminist liberal theories, radical theories, etc. There is some disagreement amongst the feminist theorists, and all are critical of traditional criminology. Again, the main reason being that traditional criminology does not take into account women's experiences. So feminist theory identifies the following as the major blind spot in traditional theory. Traditional theories have failed to look at the impact of gender and sex roles in society. For some, they're talking about differences in roles and gender inequality. For other feminist theories, they're really talking about patriarchy. So while conflict and labeling theorists recognize gender differences, feminists propose it and say that it is just as important as differences in race, class, and age. Feminist theories try to explain criminal justice decisions as being a reflection of this male dominance and how they are often used to support patriarchy. So let's start by looking at how valid these theories are. And again, these are relatively new theories, only being maybe 40, 50 years old. So if we want to examine these theories, we need the same kind of historical cross-societal comparison of patriarchal and non-patriarchal societies as is done in Marxist theory. We could also look at this looking at research on male and female disparities in criminal justice decisions in the U.S. But first, we have to begin by addressing what are those gender disparities. Feminist theory would predict that women should receive harsher treatment in the system for the same offenses as men. This would be because women have less power. But research doesn't confirm this. Just like with any other criminal justice decision, we do know that legally relevant variables are the best predictors of what will happen to someone in the system. However, we do know that race, that age, that social class also play a role, and these are what we call extra-legal factors, because they shouldn't be predictors, and they shouldn't have any role in what sort of punishment someone is receiving. When there are sex differences present, the system is basically harder on men. There's a few places here and there where women are treated a little more harshly, but for the most part, women receive much more lenient treatment. So the most common hypothesis here is the chivalry hypothesis. It basically says that since police are overwhelmingly male, prosecutors are overwhelmingly male, judges are overwhelmingly male, they tend to have this chivalrous attitude towards women, okay? And they extend this attitude even to female offenders. This explanation has really been reinterpreted as a product of paternalism. Basically, women are viewed as too weak and passive to withstand or learn from punishment by the criminal justice system. Leniency in the name of protection of essentially powerless people can actually transform into harsher treatment of these same people in the name of control. But chivalry and paternalism oversimplify what's happening to female offenders. So chivalry is not extended to all women. It's extended mostly to middle-class and white women. We refer to this as a selectivity hypothesis. And women who are charged with crimes consistent with traditional feminine stereotypes. And that is a typicality hypothesis. Poor women, minority women, offenders who offend in unladylike ways are more likely to be treated harshly. Research is mixed in support of a few aspects of these theories. There are more girls in court for what we call status offenses. If you recall, status offenses are things that are only illegal because of their status. So Generally here we're talking about juveniles. So truancy, running away, being a stubborn child. So girls are more likely to be incarcerated for status offenses and less likely to be incarcerated for serious offenses. And that's because these status offenses, this type of misbehavior, doesn't really comport with our gender expectations for women. Some argue that this is because the system sexualizes their offenses, again, as a threat to these traditional expectations and these gender roles. These findings don't necessarily support paternalism. These differences could result from other factors. So women are more likely to be charged with prostitution than men. This could be because this is easier to charge and easier to prove in court. Maybe some of these differences result from the fact that women involved in male offenses like major felonies are not as visible. Research on that selectivity hypothesis has been mixed. Early studies of interactive effects, this is where we look at how more than one dimension of inequality, when these intersect, what happens. So they've looked at this interaction between race and sex. They found that black female offenders are sentenced less harshly than black male offenders. Others found some partial support. Black females are more likely than black males to get a reduction in charges. But this is no more different compared to white female offenders. When we look at the severity of the sentence, though, these findings disappear. If we control for legal variables, severity of offense, prior record, there is no difference amongst white, black, Hispanic female defendants in terms of how severely they're sentenced. Daly argued that judicial discretion in pretrial release and sentencing are often influenced by family status and relationships. So judges tend to be more lenient with offenders who have stronger family ties and children to take care of. Since these tend to characterize women more than men, judges are more likely to give pretrial release and lenient sentences to women. Again, we want to keep remembering, though, that prior records and severity of the offense are also key. But those things do interact with that family situation. Keep in mind, though, that the legal variables are just as important. That really undercuts the theory. So conflict theory and these feminist theories are really saying that these extra legal variables are important, that they're key. In reality, they work in tandem with legal variables. So Daly had looked at an analysis of 300 felony court cases. And then he also looked at pre-sentencing reports and court transcripts. So men were more likely to receive prison sentences, but the men had actually committed more serious offenses. So in 48% of the cases, the men and women's offenses were comparable. In 40%, the men's were more serious, and in 12%, the women's were more serious. So basically, harsher penalties seemed warranted by the characteristics of the individual case. So judges did view women as more reformable, more amenable to change, but the justifications for sentencing were the same for men and women. Again, seriousness of the offense and prior records. Feminist theories expect that these criminal justice decisions would be based solely or primarily on sex roles. But this has not gained much support. So delinquent girls run a higher risk of confinement for status offenses. A higher proportion of women convicts serve time for lesser offenses. But this is probably more reflective of society's preferences that women live up to certain sexual and family roles. So again, we come back to this idea that when women offend in ways that go against their traditional gender roles, society is not happy with that, and those women are actually more likely to be treated more harshly. This is not, however, solid evidence for the argument that it is a patriarchally dominated system in which decisions are exercised to the detriment of women. Difficult to sustain this argument that minor offenses by women violate social rules of femininity, but serious felonies do not. So, again, this unladylike behavior, how could you not make the same argument that murder, warrants is a violation of social rules of femininity as well? There's a higher proportion of women serving time for lesser offenses, and this may indicate a low proportion of female offenders committing serious offenses. When men and women are convicted of the same offense and have similar prior records, their probability of serving time is about equal. So when we look at this, the independent effect of gender is weaker absent. Again, the things that most strongly impact what's going to happen to someone in the system are legally relevant, non-discriminatory factors. So they're not extra-legal factors. So let's think about some feminist theories of crime then. Essentially, the thing we want to think about here is that gender is at the center of feminist explanations of crime. We have two main problems, though. One is the generalizability problem, okay? So when we think about, when we're doing research on a group, we hope that it would apply to the large, if we're doing it with a sample, we hope that we can generalize those results to the larger population. So one thing to think about is, do the theories of men's crime apply to women? Again, remember, they've been developed with men in mind and tested with men. There's also a gender ratio problem. So we know that for every, about 3/4 of crime is committed by men, and only about 1/4 of crime is committed by women. Can we use these theories to explain that? Why are women less likely to commit crime and extremely less likely to commit crime? Most of our current theories are designed to explain male offending. They've been tested only with male populations. But there could be parts of these theories that are useful. Morris felt that traditional theory has the potential to explain female crime and why it occurs less frequently, and looking particularly at anatomy, differential association, and social bonding. This perspective, however, isn't fully developed. Others have approached developing a theory by paying close attention to the role of gender and sex roles that they think other theories have ignored or misunderstood. So if you think about something like strain theory, maybe the types of strain that we've defined do not exist for women, or they are not the same sources of strain for women. Or when we argue that the reason strain leads to crime is when people react angrily to that strain. Maybe women are less likely to have an angry reaction. So the earliest theories talk about women's liberation, and they basically say that women have not been afforded the same equality as men, and once they begin to gain similar equality to men, we should see changes in their offending. So under this, the masculinity hypothesis is sort of delivered by Adlers Women, Frida Adler, in her work Sisters in Crime. She used mostly anecdotal evidence. Remember, we don't really like anecdotal evidence. We want actual empirical evidence. And she thought that female crime was on a trajectory to converge with male crime. Part of this was showing a faster rate of increase in female arrests. So as women, again, gained, the prediction here was as women had a wider range of social roles, we would see greater involvement in crime. This, however, did not happen. The opportunity hypothesis is a narrower interpretation of these rising crime patterns. Female property offenses increased, more women were being arrested and incarcerated, but violent offenses did not increase. Rita Simon studied this and focused exclusively on property crimes. She predicted that white-collar, occupationally related crimes by women would increase because women would have more opportunity to commit those crimes. So you can't engage in a massive white-collar crime scheme, can't embezzle money if you don't have access to the type of job that would allow you to do that. So what Simon is saying here is as women gain access to those jobs, that would provide them the opportunity to commit those crimes. She said violent crime should not increase. Women were becoming increasingly educated and independent, and were less likely to accept victimization. Women were being provided with more opportunities to extricate themselves from violent relationships, more options to support themselves. Neither hypothesis, however, has received much support, as I mentioned before. We have seen increases in female non-white collar types of crime, which sort of is different from what Simon has perspective. what Simon has predicted. The economic marginalization hypothesis tries to link female crime and women's liberation with a third interpretation. Female offenders are largely poor. They're often under or unemployed. They also, however, lack alternatives to criminal means of providing for themselves. You remember we've talked before about opportunity theories. Essentially, that's just like opportunities for success that are legitimate or not evenly distributed. Now there are opportunities for illegitimate success. And one thing that's really important here is that poverty tends to have a feminine dimension. This social trend is most relevant to female criminality. And there is some research that supports this. So women may be expected to be liberated and independent, but for many women, they're still dependent on men for economic support. So higher divorce rates are due in part to women's liberation, but women become more economically vulnerable after divorce. Men do not. When we look at some measures, some research that tries to measure this economic marginality and liberation, we do find it is associated with higher female conviction rates. Female conviction rates are also associated with male economic marginalization. So women's economic fortunes are still intertwined with those of men. So crime from women, crime by women, could be an adaptation to economic deprivation, marginalization, and lack of legitimate opportunity. This is similar to anomie and similar to sources of strain. Power control theory looks at the effect of women's increased labor force participation on the gender gap in crime rates. This theory sets out to account for how gender differences in delinquent involvement and gender differences expand or contract depending on the type of family structure and the degree of parental control a parents exercise over girls compared to boys. So they look here at patriarchal families and egalitarian family structures. Patriarchal families are ones in which the dad has a job that places him in a command position where he gives orders to others. Mom does not work outside the home, or if she does, she works not in a command position, but in a position where she is receiving orders. In egalitarian families, both mom and dad work in command positions, both in obey positions, or the father is absent. So patriarchal families essentially, the dad is in charge in an egalitarian family. Dad might be absent, or mom and dad are seen as more equal. In both families, moms are more likely than fathers to exert instrumental control, essentially supervision, and relational control, which is where our emotional bonds to someone control their behavior or constrain their behavior. In patriarchal families, moms have greater control over daughters than sons. Sons are given greater freedom than daughters are. In egalitarian families, moms may exert less control over daughters or more control over sons. So this theory predicts that boys will commit more delinquency than girls in patriarchal families. Here, sons are subject to less supervision and control. They view risk-taking as more pleasurable, and they perceive fewer negative consequences. And gender differences are less pronounced in egalitarian families. Hagen did some research on this with his own data from Canada, and it did support this version. However, other research findings have been mixed. Research does not find much support for the idea that mothers play a more important role than fathers in control of children. Daughters tend to be objects of maternal control and sons the objects of paternal control, but the most damning evidence to this theory is the fact that there is a lack of support for the effect of the type of family structure. So, while Hagen has found some data from Canada that supports this, most other researchers find that there is no difference. These family structures do not play a role in gender differences in crime. So why has it been hard to replicate Hagen's findings? How come when other people look at this, they can't find the same results that Hagen did? Well, one may be how people are measuring patriarchal and egalitarian family structures. People may be using inappropriate samples. A lot of times people are examining unrelated individuals, even though this theory is talking about differences basically between siblings in the same family. Hagen revised the theory recently, Over the past 2 decades, we don't have as many patriarchal families, but gender differences in offending haven't changed much. So women have gained authority in the workplace. In patriarchal families, moms do give their sons more freedom, whereas in more balanced families, moms do not do so. They tend to treat their kids. They don't tend to treat their kids quite as differently based on gender roles. So what about patriarchal society and the role it plays in crime? So women's liberation theories are often not considered to be feminist theories. Meta Chesney-Lind, who is one of the big researchers and criminologists for feminist theory, said they're essentially flawed theory, and that these have been discredited. Many feel similarly about power control theory, too. This is the idea that mother's liberation leads to daughter's crime. So if these don't explain female crime, what does? So feminist theory's theoretical development has moved away from these prior things. More recent themes emphasize the pervasiveness of male dominance in patriarchal society. It's not a total departure from mainstream criminology, and it's really no different from those power dimensions that we've talked about in traditional criminology or Marxism, with the difference being the type of power. So feminist conflict theories talk about differences between people with power and people without power. Marxism talks about the ruling class versus the proletariat. Feminism talks about male power versus female power, and in particular, male power over women. Theorists think that this can lead to a better understanding of gender-specific offenses, things like prostitution committed by women and rape committed by men against women. So we know that the gender ratio is most skewed against male offenders in rape. Status offenses and minor delinquency by women are ways of responding to conflict in the family. So we've talked before about the special role that sexual abuse plays in women's offending. So women are often subject to sexual abuse and physical abuse in their home. They may run away and they may turn to crimes for survival. So their engagement in prostitution or theft are often survival strategies for which they are then punished in the criminal justice system. Recently, some theorists have rejected patriarchy as a concept. Messerschmitt has said patriarchy explains away any real variation in the construction of masculinity within a particular society. Crime should be conceptualized then as a structured action. So this is where people sort of talk about how crime is a way of doing gender. So Messerschmitt encourages conceptualizing multiple masculinities. Hegemonic would be adhering to a culturally idealized form of masculinity, and subordinated would be anything other than the ideal. So basically, Messerschmitt makes the argument that crime committed by men is a way of accomplishing masculinity. If you think about the subculture of violence or the code of the streets, we're talking about a similar idea here, that men are engaging in crime as a way of being masculine or gaining masculine status. Some men may have no other means except criminal behavior to demonstrate their masculinity. So doing masculinity for white middle-class boys could produce different types of crime than for white working-class boys or racial minority lower-class boys. Crimes on the street are different from those that happen in the workplace and in the family, and that depends on the man's position of authority. This theory's been criticized. It can't explain why all men do not use crime to accomplish masculinity. Also, it's tautological in nature. So men commit crime because it affirms the fact that they're men. But what makes crime masculine? Is it because men do it? And are women who are committing crimes doing femininity? Other people have talked about gendered pathways, and we've talked about this quite a bit. So perhaps what is different here is the pathways to criminal offending differ based on gender. So this could be both gendered pathways and gendered context of crime. Gendered pathways has a lot more in common with what we call life course perspective. And a lot of this research comes from ethnographic field observations. It allows women a voice in describing their criminal involvement. And again, a common theme here is physical and sexual victimization. This isn't so much an explanatory approach of offending, but it's more descriptive. The gendered context approach is much more testable. This will set the degree to which men and women encounter different normative expectations and opportunities for offending. This draws from traditional theories like social learning, social bond, and anatomy. These can account for differences in minor delinquency, but a gendered approach is necessary to account for differences in serious offending. One aspect here is looking at the organization of gender, and this should produce different gender differences in opportunities, motivations, and contexts for committing crime. Women are expected to be nurturing, be emphasizing their relationships, and these differences can influence the kind of people one encounters and also your perceptions of risks and rewards. So these may influence men and women differently. When we talk about spousal homicide, men rarely kill their wives out of fear of violent victimization, but women often kill their husbands because they're fearful of being victimized or have been victimized. Others have talked about hegemonic gender definitions. These are definitions and differences that are built into institutions, and they are really permeating most of our social interactions. Again, this produces differences between men and women in terms of their exposure to associations, definitions, and reinforcement. So the meaning, as I mentioned earlier, and importance of social bonds could be different for men and women. The meaning of strain and how people adapt to it could be different for men and women. Women who enjoy risk-taking may play out differently than it does for men. And as a result, this is likely to produce different types of offending. So how valid are these theories? They haven't been directly tested. So we don't really know if we have support for these or not. This poses some similar problems to Marxist theories. We need to measure degrees of patriarchy in different parts of society, and how do we do that? Research within the same society also does not allow for an effective comparison. So Steffensmeyer did some cross-national research where they compared the female percentage of arrests for homicide, major property crimes, and minor property crimes across several societies. They found the ratio of female to male arrestees in different societies was not related to gender inequality. It was related to the formalization of social control and greater access by women to consumer goods. So this doesn't really provide much support for these arguments either. Masculinity theories have not undergone much evaluation, and what's been done has been indirect. So if we're not directly measuring something, not really very good research. They found that career-oriented women were more likely to engage in violent and property offenses, but this was only true for white women. Research on gendered pathways has been done with both qualitative and quantitative research. Victimization surveys estimate that half of all female offenders in prison have been subject to some form of physical or sexual abuse. But these are generally small samples. Research has failed to conduct analyses that compare the victimization histories of female offenders with that of male offenders. So it has become less clear whether female victims are more likely than male victims to become offenders. There is a study of nearly 700 matched pairs of abused and non-abused children, and they don't find a gender difference. Female victims demonstrate a greater prevalence of violent offending and are more likely to be arrested for alcohol-related offenses than non-victims. But again, this doesn't really provide support for the pathway to crime being gendered. There's no direct test of the gendered context theories. So what do these policy implications mean? With all theory, we want to be thinking about, once we can explain the criminal behavior, what does that mean for how we address that offending, either to prevent it or to rehabilitate it? So feminist theory implies that we need to dismantle patriarchy. This, however, is a major societal change that is really difficult to do. So we would want to reduce gender-based disparities and inequalities in society. An example of this could be sentencing guidelines that limit the discretion judges have. We could compare sentencing decisions prior to, immediately after, and long after sentencing guidelines. And this was done in Minnesota. Some differences disappeared immediately, but but reappeared several years later, mostly because judges figured out how to circumvent the guidelines. Chesney Lynn suggested prevention and treatment should be preferred over punitive policies for female offenders, given the special unique circumstances they face. They're particularly vulnerable to sexual assault, domestic violence, unplanned pregnancy, and teen motherhood. So we want to take this into account when we design treatment and prevention for them. There are programs that do address these things, but they often don't think about how this is different for women. Research does confirm that women are less violent, more amenable to treatment, and they respond better than men to these programs. And that wraps up our lecture on feminist theories.